It's 2 o'clock. I'm Olive Martini, and this is the Working on Wellness Radio Forum that we do the second Wednesday of every month. And my guest today is James Castell. He is with Castell Insurance, and he's been part of the insurance industry in Sequim for nearly 15 years. He's a second-generation agent who's helped grow his family agency into a vital community resource when it comes to Medicare and Health Insurance. Named Best of Clallam County for 3 years running, they take great pride in providing relatable advice and always doing what's best for the customer and not the insurance companies. They've helped thousands of Clallam County residents navigate the ever-changing landscapes of Medicare Supplements, Medicare Advantage, the affordable health care. During this forum, James will discuss and explain the newest changes and additions to these programs for the upcoming 2024 fall enrollment period. Welcome, James.
Why, thank you. Thanks for having me. That's quite a intro we get there.
Well, we aim to please. So a lot of things that are going to be changing with Medicare, we think. And so we want to start off with letting our listeners know, what is Medicare?
Sure. And just to be safe, because there may be Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services listening, we're going to talk very general terms because there's a lot of things that we know that we can't start talking about until October 1st. So in general, Medicare, for most folks in our community and that are listening, is the senior health insurance that's provided by the federal government. So going back eons, folks only got health insurance from their employer, and then there needed to be something that filled the gap after they retired. So Medicare is something that everyone pays into as you work in the United States over your time. It's coming off your paycheck, usually taken before you even notice it, and it's paying for your future health insurance needs. So Medicare, for most people, the majority of folks on it, is when you turn 65, is when you first become eligible.
Okay, and how soon, if you're turning 65, when can you sign up?
Well, it's a great question. We're seeing more and more people that are working past 65. So there's a little bit of a nuance there. Historically, going back 40 years ago, if you worked till 65, it was like, what's wrong with you? You're a dinosaur. But nowadays, with cost of living and life expectancy, people are working a lot longer. If you are planning to use Medicare as your health insurance, you can start 3 months prior to your 65th birthday month, I should say. So if you were born in January, you can start in October by contacting Social Security or going to Medicare.gov is how you can start that enrollment process.
And if you haven't signed up for Social Security and don't intend to for a couple of years, how do you get billed by Medicare?
Yeah, great question. So initially they bill you quarterly. So when you sign up for Medicare, and there's all sorts of parts and costs and those things, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, you will get a paper bill in the mail, believe it or not, still using mail to send you information. But you'll get a quarterly bill that you can write them a check. And I believe in the last few years, they've allowed you to call and you can actually get set up on a monthly auto draft if you'd prefer, because sometimes, having to come up with a bigger chunk every quarter is a little more painful and kind of hard to project than just having that monthly lower amount on repeat.
So how much does it cost?
For most people, again, general terms, there are a couple primary parts to Medicare. There's Part A. And for those of you listening that have Medicare, you'll know the red, white, and blue card, and they'll show Part A and Part B. So Part A is free. That covers your hospitalizations. Part of what you've paid into all these years, you will get hospital care free of charge. Part B, however, does have a premium. And sometimes this is a surprise to people. They say, well, I've paid all these years. Why do I have to pay now? Cost of insurance and healthcare has gone up a lot. So right now, the standard cost for Part B is $174 and change monthly. And the reason I say standard, this is getting a little deep in the weeds, but I hope this is what we can do. Depending on your income, you might pay a little bit more. So if you're a higher earner, or your spouse and you're married and filing jointly and your income is higher, you may pay higher than that. There are different brackets that are available on Medicare.gov that you can look up. It's something that we affectionately call IRMA, which is Income Rate Medicare Adjustment, I believe, that basically says if you make 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, woe is me, but you may pay a little bit more than the 175 because that's how the system works.
Okay. And so what if you enroll late? What happens?
Well, there's two scenarios if you enroll late. If you enroll late and you wait until 67, 68, 69, 70, but you've been covered by your employer, there's really no big deal. your employer will help facilitate forms that you would submit to Medicare that says, "Dear Mr. Medicare, I've been covered by my work's health insurance this whole time. Please grant me forgiveness." And there's no penalty, there's no, harm. So if you work past 65, great. You don't have to do anything.
But that's only if you've got insurance coverage.
If you have insurance coverage elsewhere, correct.
Okay.
So think your larger employers. If you're self-employed or you're a realtor paying for your own insurance or something, that's a different case.
Okay.
But if you work for a larger employer, locally, hospitals, school districts, whatever, you're going to have coverage. If you wait and you just were under a rock or living out in the woods off the grid and you come to my office at 70 years old and said, "Now I want health insurance," there's a pretty big penalty. The way that it works is you will pay for every year that you didn't have it when you really ought to have. You'll pay a 10% additional charge of what Medicare costs.
So you get A for free.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying that if you don't sign up for B, then that's where the penalty comes in?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, because they're going to look at it, and understandably why. Insurance is one of those very weird things. It's a promise on paper that no one ever wants to use. No one's happy about it. No one loves it. 65 seems to be kind of the difference where people are like, finally, I get good insurance. It's low cost. I'm going to use it because, let's face it, most of our bodies start breaking down as we age up. So for an example, if you went 10 years without, if you came and saw me at 75 and go, "Man, my shoulder's starting to hurt. Now I want coverage." That's 10 years you've gone without. You're going to pay double. And it's not a one-time slap on the wrist. That penalty is what you will pay for the rest of your life.
Okay.
So if you waited 10 years, yes, you've saved 10 years worth of premiums, but going forward, you're going to pay double the Part B cost in perpetuity.
Okay.
So don't wait. It's always better to start when you need it. And I can talk about some other things why that's important as well.
Well, talk a little bit about the additional insurance that you need on top of Medicare.
Yeah. So Medicare is great for the most part. And it's great when you have minor health needs and you're not, terminally ill or having big ongoing expenses. The way Medicare works in general is Part A, you have a deductible. I think it's pretty low. It's about $1,600. So if you decide to go just with the paper card, if you go to the hospital, it's $1,600 per visit, not per year, but per visit. And then Part B, for essentially, without getting too nitty gritty, Part B covers 80% of your costs. So if you go to the doctor and it's a $100 visit, you would pay $20. Medicare pays $80. It sounds great. If you go for outpatient treatment, like a knee surgery, scoping or something, or cancer treatment, and that's $10,000 a visit or $40,000 a procedure, 20% of that can add up pretty quickly. So that's where most people in the U.S. today purchase something to help absolve them of that 20%.
Okay.
They don't like that unknown.
Sure.
It's a quick way to really dip into your savings and your, nest egg if you don't know what your expenses are going to be.
We've been talking about additional insurance that you need on top of Medicare, but James, I'd like to know what all the letters mean because I understand A, I understand B, but then there's D and C and N and G and F, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So tell us about some of those.
Yeah, God bless the federal government, but not always are they going to be creative or, make things simple to understand. So the way that, we talked about A and B are your basics. That's what's provided from the government. Then, as you notice, we talked about hospital and outpatient care. We didn't talk about prescription drugs, which is a huge buzzword. If anyone was watching the debate last night or anytime, anywhere, anything, prescription drugs are a big deal for especially folks as they age past 65. So that's Part D. And I always remember it as D for drugs.
D for drugs.
That's the easiest way that I can, if it's not D for prescriptions, we just call it D for drugs. So Part D is a way that folks can acquire coverage to help them with their prescriptions. There's a lot of nuance there. There's lots of changes that happen every single year with those plans. There are plans currently on the market today as low as $0. So if you don't really want prescription drug coverage, you don't take any prescription drugs, you can still enroll in a plan that allows you to have coverage at a very affordable cost. And then as things ratchet up, if you have higher needs, you can pay, much more each month.
Is D something that you also have to sign up for?
Have to is an interesting word. So, there's two ways to get a behavior, right? Have you heard this one? There's either a carrot or the stick. So the federal government uses the stick. They're big into penalties. So we talked about a late enrollment penalty for Part B. There's also the same for Part D. Anyone can buy it. With Part D coverage, you can buy anytime, any year at 69, 70, 71. As long as you buy during the open enrollment period, which is coming up very soon, you can buy it. There's no underwriting. Even if you say, I'm going to take 45 drugs, they have to cover you. But if you didn't have coverage for those 5 years prior, you'll pay a penalty.
Okay.
So there are some incentives, and that's why there are some programs out there as low as $0, because those insurance companies know, hey, the people buying these ones probably aren't going to be very high users. So we're going to sell them kind of a, stripped down basic, call it like a bronze style plan, because they know, hey, we're getting them in the door. They're probably subsidized in the back end by Medicare some way, shape, or form, but it at least allows you to have coverage and avoid that penalty, that stick that Medicare likes to carry.
What's the C stand for?
C, this is where things get weird. C is the actual textbook definition of Medicare Advantage.
Okay.
So we will talk about that, I'm sure. I know I prepped my notes and brushed up on all of this. That's a very big buzzword, and in about 3 weeks' time, you will not be able to turn on the news or the radio or anywhere without hearing Medicare Advantage, 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 Advantage. So Part C is the technical term for Medicare Advantage.
So what's... and so N and G and F, those are all kind of like C?
No.
Okay.
No, gosh, no. So N, G, and F are what's called a Medicare Supplement or a Medigap policy. Those are two terms that are very frequently thrown around. If you go on Medicare.gov, they actually have really great educational information on there. Medigap or Medicare Supplement, it helps pick up some of that 20% that we talked about earlier, and it helps supplement Medicare. So I'm, using the hand motion. Medicare is still your insurance. You're just buying something to beef it up. Because if you don't love the thought of that hospital copay, and you don't love the thought of 20% definitely, you can hire a private company to help team up with you. So then you kind of have three people covering your bills. You, Medicare, and a private company to help really limit your exposure. So instead of potentially paying thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for medical care, you might only pay a few hundred in a given year, depending which level. And it's Goldilocks. There's always the right plan. Good, better, best. You can pay more if you're, a frequent flyer, you're going to the hospital, you have lots of illnesses, ailments. You probably want better coverage. If you're 65, you're healthy, and you're just worried about, I want to protect, my nest egg, and I'm willing to drop a couple $1,000, you can get pretty affordable coverage in addition to Medicare.
And so each of those letters is a different type of coverage, and that the best way to figure out what's best for you is to talk with an agent.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, yes. That's, where I think there's tons of resources out there. There are some people that really want to do all the research themselves. YouTube's a great place. Medicare.gov is a great place. There's tons of information out there. And in most instances, I don't know if this is a shameless plug, when you talk to insurance agents, whether it's myself or anyone, anywhere, they don't charge fees for their services. So Medicare really governs what you can and can't do. So there's no broker fee. There's no additional cost. So if you're going to, some people just like that extra oomph to give them confidence. Like, am I choosing the right thing? Right.
So again, the difference between Medigap and Medicare Advantage.
How much time do we have before the next song?
Oh, we have 10 minutes.
So this is the one, if there's ever a part, if we're going to take a snippet out of this and turn it into any sort of educational piece, this is the biggest component where people are confused. Medicare Advantage, Part C, is a replacement for Medicare. Confusing. I paused there because people go, Why? It's still called Medicare. I wish they weren't allowed to do that, but that's just the way it is. It replaces Medicare. It is assigning all of your insurance rights over to a private company. Medicare Supplements and Medigap is, again, Medicare, you, and a third party to help you kind of mix it all up and who's paying what bill. The difference here is that Medicare, it's costing the federal government a lot of money. And bless their hearts, our federal government's not very good with money. We're going backwards on every line item, we're going red. And so what they've done is developed a program to say, hey, dear insurance companies, you guys have been insuring these people for eons. How do you do it and not go broke? So Medicare Advantage allows people to shift from Medicare, the government, over to a private company. You know, all the ones you see ads for, every company out there, almost all of them do it. The difference is now you're not insured by Medicare. So every bill, every claim, everything to do with your insurance is just as if you were insured when you were working or under 65. Like I have health insurance with a company through my company. So, I mean, it's very similar. You are privately insured, and there's a ton of nuances and differences what makes that good and bad.
So tell me what makes it good.
Great question. So the pros of a Medicare Advantage program. Number one is oftentimes going to be simplicity. It covers hospitals, doctors, prescriptions, all with one piece of plastic. So one card covers everything. Oftentimes, again, not always, but oftentimes they'll sweeten the pot by including dental, vision, and hearing. It's like the holy trinity of extra benefits. You've probably heard the TV ads. If you're not getting dental, vision, and hearing, call us today and find out why. These are private insurance companies trying to put out the honeypot to say, come be our customer. Leave the federal government's, bankroll and come be a member of company XYZ. So the pros are it's going to be simple because you have one card. It's usually lower cost. And I'll explain how that happens. These insurance companies aren't doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because the government's paying them. So if you, Olive, turn 65 and you decide, hey, forget the federal program, I'm going to go with this sweet deal that gives me all these, goodies and a gym membership and all this stuff. The government goes, whew, we're off the books with her because if she gets cancer or she needs a knee replacement or she gets sick, we don't have to pay for Olive's bills. The new company does. So they actually, behind the scenes, pay and subsidize that company to take you. So the company's risk is a little bit lowered. And because of that, if they're going to get, I'm just going to use a round number, it's around $1,000 a month or something. If they get that for every person they bring in, of course, 1 out of the 100 people is going to pop and be like a big expense. But maybe the 99 allow us to pay for that one and have just a little bit left over at the end where we're profitable. And that's where those insurance actuarials come in to really crunch those numbers. So
you need to look at your own situation, kind of decide, if you're pretty healthy, that might be the way to go.
Definitely.
And what if you're not healthy? What if you've got an awful lot of things going on with you that you know about right now, and you might have to take drugs in the future that you're not taking now, but you know that it might be connected with something that is happening with you. What would you advise that person to do?
Well, it's so individualized, and what I'll always say, it also comes down to budget as well. Everyone wants the nice 3,000 square foot home on waterfront, but maybe not everyone can afford it. So there is a bit of a kind of shifting of what makes the most sense with your budget. So what I can tell you is on the lower cost Advantage programs, there's tons of benefits. We haven't talked about some of the cons yet, but with a lower cost, if you're going to pay, 10%, I always try to, how can I relate it? If you go to the car lot and you go look and there's two F-150s staring you in the face and one's $55,000 and one's $90,000. They look like the same truck on the outside, but they are not the same truck. One gets all the bells and whistles. One's got leather, sunroof, autopilot, all the stuff. The other one, unfortunately, 55 is the starting price now, but the other one is stripped down and you're missing stuff. When you buy those trucks, you don't expect them to be the same thing. And that is how I can hopefully explain to people, if you buy a plan that is $15 a month instead of $150, you cannot reasonably expect them to behave the same. So on the Advantage program, it's usually lower cost on the front end, but you'll see some buildup of co-pays and pay-as-you-go for your healthcare. So it may seem like you're saving now,
right,
but if you're one of those people that you mentioned, I have all these expected procedures, surgeries, health's not good, my family history, yada, yada, yada. It might not be wise to save on the front end because you can end up paying more as you go for care.
So what are the cons of an Advantage plan?
Yeah, so there's really kind of 3 or 4 cons that I would say. Number 1, network. So with the federal government, if you stay on that Medicare Medigap, you can basically go see anyone. Everyone bills the government. Aside from like some naturopaths and a little bit of chiropractic, but like any hospital, any specialist, any provider, podiatrist, you could be in Tuscaloosa or, New York City. You can go anywhere. With an Advantage program, because you are insured by that private company, now we're talking about network. Dear Mr. Doctor, do you accept XYZ insurance? And you got to kind of look through that. And so it's going to be a little bit more potential for restrictions on where you can go. Also, what's called prior authorizations or referrals. You might not just be able to call up and say, hey, I need to go to the physical therapist. I want to get in. Your insurance company, because again, they're controlling profitability. It's a private company. They may go, well, why? Why do you need that 6 more visits for your knee? Are you getting knee, work, or are you really just getting massage? They're going to do a little bit more kind of managed care where they're looking for those things. So when you combine network, potential for referrals, and then ultimately the big one is if you choose an Advantage program, which are great for a lot of people, we help with both. So we just want to make sure people get the right thing. It's not a guarantee that you can change from an Advantage to a supplement and back and forth and back and forth. There's a little bit of like a one-way bridge onto the Advantage Island. So if in 5 years' time your health starts to deteriorate and you go, man, I want to get to the good stuff that really doesn't limit who I can see, doesn't limit all these things, you might not be able to because there could be health underwriting questions. And then all of a sudden people go, what? I thought I could change every year. And it's not always the case.
So on Part D insurance, that you really explained that better than I think I've heard it before, because I didn't know that there was a difference between staying on Medicare. Well, what I didn't realize was that if you go on an Advantage plan, you are no longer on Medicare, sort of, right?
I couldn't tell you how many people I talk to in a given year, month, whatever, that come to us and go, well, this is my Medicare, this is my supplement. This is what I have in addition to Medicare. And I have to say, this is what you have instead of Medicare.
You see, and I don't think an awful lot of people realize that. Because you think about it, I've got Medicare because, I'm over 65, and I've got all of these nice perks over here that I get through this Advantage plan. So I did not know that.
And it's great. And again, maybe it was 2 years ago. Don't fact check me here. But within the last 3 years, it shifted forever. The majority of folks that bought additional coverage had a Medicare supplement. But about 2 or 3 years ago, it shifted to where, I mean, not much, but it was like 52% of Americans that bought something went Advantage. And, there's different areas. Geographical region makes a big difference. The more rural you are, the less options you have.
Do I need Part D coverage?
This is, we talked about, you don't need it. It's not a requirement. You can go without. There's a lot of folks that we meet that are more naturopathic focused. They're going to take supplements instead of pharmaceuticals. And you can always go without. And you can always get it again and again. Like we talked about, you can enroll each year during open enrollment. But if you go without, there is that penalty we kind of discussed. So it's not a requirement, but it certainly is a suggestion for most to have some form of prescription drug coverage because, unfortunately in our country, prescription drugs are loosely regulated on cost. So if you're on one hot blood pressure pill, that's like run of the mill and it's going to cost you next to nothing. If you start going on heart medications or blood thinners or inhalers or some things that we see are very expensive, you can get sticker shock when it's $400, $500, $600 or more a month. Like that's the worst case scenario when people don't have the coverage. They go to the doctor, they walk to the pharmacy and find out, boom, it's $500 a month. That's when they get their jaw picked up off the floor and they usually try to find out what their options are.
Tell us about the donut hole and how it's changing in 2025.
Well, it's such a clever name. And if you can imagine like the Homer Simpson traditional donut, this is where they came up with it. And what the donut hole means is prescription drug coverage. The government kind of came out and said, look, insurance companies, we need your help. As we talked about, the government's not great at insurance. They're good, but not great. We need your help to help folks cover their prescriptions. So back in 2005, the companies kind of said, we will play along, we will help, but we need some rules in play to protect us as well. So what they said is, for most people, I think it's like 80% of people, this doesn't matter. Most people don't take very expensive drugs. So they'll spend $200-$300 in a given year on copays, and they're good. But if you start taking those 5, 6, I've seen some that are over $1,000 a month, the insurance company goes, we will help you out, but at some point in time, we're going to ask you to come back in at a higher share. So when you vision the donut hole, you start, you're paying your deductible, and then that first part of the donut before you get to the center, that's where the coverage is. And they go, great, Olive, you've got a $50 copay each month. So you're covered at $50, $50, $50, $50. But the company goes, look, once we've shelled out $8-10 grand on your behalf, that $50 is gone. You're going to come back in and pay a little bit more. So the hole in the center, so you're going to get coverage help on that first part of the donut. And then the hole that's in the center is where the company goes, dear Olive, you get to pay 25% of that prescription now because we've hemorrhaged money on you. So you're going to come back in and pay a little bit more. And then if it goes really high, you get to the other side of that hole, and then the drug is covered in full. So there's a lot of government subsidy that goes on here. As we talked about with Medicare Advantage, the insurance companies, they're getting kickback somewhere. The government is thanking them for helping. So there is money that's exchanged. But how it's changing for next year, you've probably seen or heard or read the Inflation Reduction Act. It was one of those bills that had, 190,000 different things involved. Prescription drugs for seniors was one of them. That was a big one that slipped in there. And the way that they've designed it is that it will cap, instead of you potentially paying $8,000 a year or more on prescriptions, it says no senior on Medicare will pay more than $2,000 per year for their prescriptions. Wow. And that starts next year. So we're only 3 months away. So for most people, again, close to 80%, doesn't make a difference because they weren't ever hitting that donut hole. They weren't hemorrhaging money. They take 3, a blood cholesterol, high blood pressure, and a sleeping aid, and they pay $50 a year in cost. But for those 20% or 15% that have really, really high costs and that are really strapped and fixed income and going down quick, that $2,000 cap is going to be a game changer because instead of having to budget $8,000 or $10,000 for their prescriptions, $2,000. That's a pretty big difference.
Does Medicare cover dental, hearing, and vision?
No.
So
we
kind of covered that, right?
Yeah, some of these topics that I spoon-fed myself are a little bit out of order, but no, dental, vision, and hearing. And I don't know where this happened or what industry, and we're probably going back hundreds of years. But how are teeth not a part of your body? How are your eyes? I mean, I'm looking at you right now, Olive. They're in here. Why would my cheeks be covered by health insurance, but my eyes not? I don't know, but there's a carve out different industry for those. From my opinion, buying individual private insurance for those things, it doesn't really pencil out. If you go look at private dental plans, private vision plans, the money just is usually better saved and then spend as you go. Mm-hmm. Medicare doesn't cover it. Quite frankly, a lot of times when you're working and under 65, your actual health insurance doesn't. You usually get a separate card for dental and a separate card for vision from your, employer. So the Medicare doesn't cover it. This is why we talked about Medicare Advantage as they're trying to set out the honeypot and how can they lure you in and get you excited. They can. As a Medicare Advantage provider, these companies are required to cover the same things that Medicare does. So hospitals, doctors, cancer treatment, all the main stuff, they have to cover. But it doesn't say that they can't cover more. So what they've done is go, great, we're going to tack on top of Medicare and give you a little bit more to hopefully, again, bring you in, sign you up, and get some of that government subsidy.
Can I change my insurance plan in the future?
Ooh, well, this is a great question because as everything in being vague, it depends. It depends which plan you have and what we're talking about. Medigap policies or Medicare Supplements, and I'm going to focus on Washington because that's where we are. We're sitting in Western Washington. In Washington, you can change your Medigap any time of the year. As long as you have one, if you're on a Plan N, you can change from Plan N to G today. You can change from N to N, change companies anytime throughout the year. anything to do with your prescription drugs, so Part D and those Medicare Advantage programs, not the same. You are stuck in a 12-month contract, and you can change your Part Ds during open enrollment. So as I've joked, I could probably get the dates tattooed on my forearm, October 15th until December 7th. That is when you always have that 10-week period or whatever it is to go and look and review your prescriptions and look and review your Advantage programs. You can always change between those, so you can go D to D, change from one company to another and get a different drug plan based on your needs or how the plan changes. And same with that Advantage stuff that we talked about. You can change from one Advantage plan to another, but the caveat there that we talked about is you can't always change from an Advantage back to a supplement. And you can't, just because it's open enrollment doesn't mean that you get to go from that low cost, higher risk plan to, you know what, I'm going to have that knee surgery and have my back checked out next year. Now I want the good stuff. Those companies are going to look at you and go, wait a minute, why are you coming back to us now? Because when you come to our side, we pay almost everything. Why weren't you with us the last 5 years? And so they're going to have some questions to ask you in the form of health underwriting.
So where I live impacts my options. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So depending on what plan we talk about, Medicare supplements in general are offered statewide. So if a company offers it, you can get the supplement anywhere. And what we talked about, again, because that's just kind of pigtailing and beefing up Medicare. You can buy it anywhere in the state. You can also use it anywhere. So if you snowbird or you travel a lot or you like road tripping or you take 6 months in your RV, Medicare supplements are amazing because you're utilizing Medicare as your primary. And that means you can go see any doctor anywhere. Don't have any questions about it. But what's available to you in form of Medicare Advantage program, for sure a difference based on where you live. For example, out here in Clallam County, we have 2 or 3 providers that offer Advantage programs. And you're looking at a choice of 6 or 7. It's pretty manageable. A couple companies, a few choices. If you were to move to King County and go to Medicare.gov and go, show me my options. Last year, I think they had over 50 Advantage plans to choose from. And sometimes choice is amazing, but it can also be really overwhelming. And it's really hard to tell the difference. I gave you the example of those 2 F-150s earlier. Imagine if I lined up 45 F-150s and the price differences went from 55 to 57 to 59, 61, 63, and it went all the way up to, and you're going, how am I supposed to know which one is best for me? Like sometimes too much choice. I have young kids. When we go to a restaurant, if it's one of those menus, too much choice can be a bad thing too.
What if I'm traveling overseas? Am I covered by Medicare?
Yeah, this is a great question. The answer really point blank is no. There are some caveats. We talked about Advantage programs. There should be some coverage there when you travel even outside of the network. With Medicare supplements, most of them have a $50,000 lifetime benefit. So that means like they'll track you and see what you've done in your given lifetime. But it's also in a reimbursement process at 80%. So if you had a $10,000 hospital visit in Canada, you'd still likely be on the hook for about $2,000, and your supplement company will help reimburse you for the 80. So there's not a lot of great coverage for folks going out of the country. We would normally suggest, depending on the length and the time and what you're doing, probably to secure international travel insurance. Mm-hmm. I was unfortunate or fortunate, whatever you want to say. We used ours last spring with my son. We went to Mexico and we bought it. It was like pretty inexpensive, maybe $150 for all 4 of us. But he cut his leg and had to go get stitches at the hospital or at the pool in Mexico, and so we used it. So it's like I'm the hair club guy. Like I'm not just a spokesman, I'm a customer as well because we actually use the insurance, and so now I'll probably advise that for life.
What changes can be expected this enrollment period?
You said we have 9 minutes only?
We have
oh my
8
gosh.
minutes.
Okay. There's a lot. So again, open enrollment is very important each and every year because just because your plan, you liked it this year, and we're really going to focus on what we talked about, Advantage programs and drugs. If your main component of your insurance is a Medicare supplement, like we talked about, you can really kind of ask questions any time of the year. You can change that any month. You can come see us, and those of you that have that plan, you'll even see insurance companies, like one of our biggest companies changes their price in April. So it wouldn't be fair if you were set in cement boots and they could change the price in April. You always have that flexibility year round. So when we talk about open enrollment, we're talking about Part D and Advantage programs. And just because you liked your plan this year and it worked for you and it covered great, things can change underneath the hood. So again, going back, I just try to make it relatable. Going back to that truck scenario, a lot of trucks can look the same, but you don't know what's under the hood. You don't know if it's got a smaller engine or a big diesel pusher to pull, 30,000 pounds. And same can be said about insurance plans. So because your plan that you have in your hand may have been $0 this year, you may have liked it, and you may get a letter that says, hey, we're going from $0 to $4. You may just be inclined to kind of turn a blind eye and go, hey, $4, not a big deal, don't care. But what if I told you that change of $4 also meant you went from a diesel engine to a gas engine? You didn't know it without looking under the hood. So that's why it's super important when we talk about all of these plans. They change a lot. You may change. So in a given year, if you get a new prescription, new medical needs, new things coming up, it's important for you to look at those things. And again, knowing what's coming down the pipe and making sure that I'm towing the line that we talked about from minute one. The Inflation Reduction Act, although really great for the end user, really great for those folks that have high prescription costs, it's not going to be super friendly for the insurance companies. So they have been asked to swallow a huge majority of those costs. So instead of it being shifted to the end user who's going to pay lots for their prescriptions, the federal government said, dear Mr. Insurance Company, you have to eat the costs. You have to figure it out. And from what I've learned, these companies, the reason why they're in business still all these years without going negative, like we talked about, they don't like eating costs. So there's going to be a lot of shakeup. And the shakeup could look in the form of fewer plan choices. It could be more plan choices with tons of different benefits. So again, that scenario of if I'm looking at 2 trucks, it's easy to choose between. But what if now there's 20 trucks and you don't it's going to take some research as to find out what's best for you. And then ultimately, we're going to see some changes like I talked about under the hood. The policies may look the same. It may still have a $600 deductible and all the copays, but what prescriptions do they cover? If you're taking a big buzz one that we've talked about with lots of people over the years is Eliquis, which treats folks with heart issues. Maybe your plan covered it this year and maybe next year it won't. And so you'd be asked to say, well, we'll cover the alternative. We'll cover a warfarin or something that is a, more generic version. And maybe you don't want to take that. Maybe you don't want to go from driving a Chevy to a Ford or the big truck to the small, you just don't know. So it's just, we always stress, and we've always stressed for years, it's important to do your research each year. But I would wager with some of these changes that we're forecasting, I really suspect this will be one of the most tumultuous open enrollments we've seen in years.
So let me ask you this. If you want to do your own research, where would you suggest people go?
Well, it's how I learned to fix anything on my house. I always go to YouTube. I think that's a great way from the comfort of your own home with no pressure to look up resources. There's a lot of great free information out there.
Okay. And if you're not willing to do that, find an agent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And talk through what it is that you need.
Yep, absolutely.
So for you personally, and people wanted to come and talk to you about it, would they need to make an appointment with you?
Yeah, and this year, because of some of this tumult and change, I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about our company or not, but we've got a lot, and I know that the community will have a lot. We're going to have a lot of classes available. So for our current customers, we've got the Guy Cole Center booked out locally here. We'll probably try to find a way to do a few Zoom classes as well, because we know the 8 till 4 hours that I prefer to work don't work for everyone. So we'll try our best. But because of the immense need that we are projecting, we're outnumbered. There's only 3 of us and we have thousands of customers. And so with this need, we project that we're going to need to do more mass communications, which is going to be these classes where we can fit a couple hundred bodies in at a time.
That makes sense.
Where we can do YouTube, because there's only so many hours. Unfortunately, the government only gives us those 7 weeks I told you about. I can't have hour-long conversations in just 7 weeks with everyone that wants to have it. So we're probably going to be doing a lot of mass education. And again, YouTube's a great way to do it from the comfort of your own home, where there's no pressure. You can do it with your cup of coffee and your pajamas or whatever you feel comfortable with. But there's a lot of resources out there. And again, we know it's coming. It comes every year. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people that call me on December 6th going, hey, what's all this open enrollment about? You've been knowing about it forever. It's tattooed on my forearm. We know the dates. Clear your calendar. And for each individual, I see we're coming short on time, each individual, you've got one of you. It may take a couple of hours. For us, when we try to help thousands of people, that 7 weeks becomes really condensed. So find the time that's good, the first or second week, whenever it is, before Thanksgiving, get it done so you don't have to worry about it, because no one likes feeling pressured when it comes to making a big choice like this.
James, I want to thank you so much for coming in today. These working on wellness education programs, normally we do medical, but this has been wonderful, and I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have too. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, thank you for having me. All of this has been really fun, and
You'll have to do it again.
If my dogs are listening, who's a good boy, Griffey?
Working on Wellness is a health education program of the Dungeness Valley Health and Wellness Clinic, Sequim's free clinic. The clinic provides basic urgent care and chronic health care services to the uninsured in our community. So thanks for being with us. And James, thanks again.
Thank you.